खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह गुरमुख प्यारियो. We are now at week 5 of the Sikh meditation course. Welcome to all of those who've joined today. And Sangat ji, let us spend this precious time today to go deeper into this spiritual path, this internal forge, internal discovery. Because Sangat ji, this course is not just about acquiring knowledge. That actually we only need as much knowledge, enough gyan, to convince the mind to go inward, to do that internal forge of our sari, our body, which is where that true gyan will become pargat, manifest inside of us. In Gurbani it says, Gurmukh hove, so kaya khoje, hor sab param bulahi. That the Gurmukh is the one that searches that sari, that kaya. And so Sangat ji, Gurbani is the outcome of the Khoj, the process and the outcome, in fact, of the Khoj that the Bhagats, Guru Sahiba have done. And within Gurbani, there is a roadmap so that the spiritual seeker has a pathway, a kind of a map to follow. But ultimately, Gurmukh Gyan eko hai jata, an din Ram ravijya hai. That really the only gyan that we need ultimately is to chant that name, to chant that naam, an din Ram ravijya hai, day and night. So Sangat ji, in the previous session, we were going deeper in our understanding of Trigun and how Simran allows us to embody that lotus flower, that when we come to play, when the mind comes to play, when it goes from its home and comes to play this game, first thing, when we open the eyes for the first time in the morning, the mind comes into the body to play. And now we all know that within this body are those huts. Kaya kot apar hai, andar hut nalle, Gurmukh sauda jo kare har vast samale. That there are these huts and the mind comes as a trader and has this special vastu, this special wealth. And every breath, whilst the mind is playing within this sari, the mind is making a trade. And we were understanding in the last session that whilst the mind is trading in those dragon, doing that kacha, that false trade, what the mind experiences is turbulence, is conflict, is anxiety, is anger. And we were understanding that the Gur Mantar, the Shabad, developing that connection between Surti and Shabad, between mind and Gurmantar takes that mind into such a position on that kinara, on that riverbank, just outside those Tregun, which allows the mind to play and do the things it needs to do to sustain livelihood, but is removed from those Tregun enough so that just in the same way that that Murgabi in Gurbani that's described, it sits on that surface of the water, but the feathers don't get wet. Just in that same way, the mind can learn to sit just on that surface and is so good at coming back to that bank, coming back to that kinara, that it doesn't get wet, that it doesn't get continually tainted, dirty from those vichar within Tregun Maya. So Sangatji, today we're going to take that understanding even further. And we've been mentioning that we're going to talk about the internal family. And today we're going to spend the time using the wisdom that we have from the Gurbani, from those Gurmukhs who've done Khoj of their Sarir, who have told us that there's this and this and this inside your Sarir, that there is Naam, and there are Panch, and there's Tregun, and there's Dharamraj, and there's Chitragupt, and there is Atma. And all of this Gyan is given within the Gurbani so that the spiritual seeker can know how exactly to play the game, what are the obstacles that come up, how we can connect with particular members of that Sarir so that we can experience a fruitful life and achieve our spiritual purpose of meeting Paramatma. So Sangatji, we're going to use the interactive. Before we do go into this, we're going to do a little check-in. And what I will invite Sangat to do is to, in the chat box, I'm going to open that up, share, Sangatji, your experiences, because as we remember, the homework from last week was to see whether we could both increase the practice and, crucially, whether we could keep a connection to the practice in whatever shape or form throughout the day, connecting back to Gurmantar, or keeping our dhyan close to our face, close to our eyes, to try and keep some of that connection in this, whilst the mind plays here in this desh. So Sangatji, at this point, I would like to invite Sangat members to share their experiences of how their Simran Bhakti has been going, and any experiences of trying to do those two together, the spiritual and the material, and how Sangat have found that. Gurbani tells us, Karma, Dharma, Doe Chopar Sajo, Sat Karo Tum Sari. That keeping those two paths of Karam and of Dharam in parallel, and that being the true way of life. So Sangatji, please do, for those who do want to share in the chat, please do so. And whilst Sangat members are sharing, we're going to, those who don't have anything to share just now, can do Antargat Simran, so that we can, even in the process of this call, maximize the swas that are spent in that state of connection, in that state of sahaj. Vai Guru, Vai Guru, Vai Guru, Vai Guru, Vai Guru, Vai Guru. Vaheguru, 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 Vaheguru. So Sangatjit, Taranjit Singh has sent a message on the chat, and this is a very important issue, topic, conversation around the more that we do Simran, do those Banj Jor try to attack us more. So the simple answer to that is yes, that this game involves the mind, the Banj, and in the same way that the mind is instructed, both when it's receiving its training in the womb and through the Gurbani, that the mind is instructed that there are Panj inside of us that will take us into disconnection, which are stealing that Amrit that we are receiving. And if there were no opponents, this game would not be as interesting. There would be no game. So the game has been created in such a way that we have these opponents inside of us. And when we read the Gurbani, we understand that these forces are strong, that these Panj are not weak. And the Guru Sahibs themselves have described this play as being like a wrestling in a wrestling arena. That the mind is the wrestler and there are these 5 opponents. Gurbani says, Ho Gosai da Pehlavanara. Pehlavan is wrestler. Main Gurmil Uch Dumalada. And if we continue to read that Shabad, it explains how those Panj are those opponents. And they're strong. Raak Pita Prabh Mere, Mohe Nirguna Sab Guna Tere, Panch Bikhadi, Ek Gariba, Rakho Rakhanhare. That Guru Sahib is doing this ardas to Paramatma and saying that there's just one of me, that there's 5 of these Bikhadi, Panch Bikhadi, Ek Gariba, Rakho Rakhanhare. So we know that these Panj are powerful and that they have this role within this game to take the mind away from connection. And in the same way, when we learn how to play this game, when we have the tool of the Guru Mantar, we fight every day with these Panj. Kaam, Krodh, is nagar mein sabla, nit ut jooj karije. Within this nagar of the body, we have those Kaam, we have Krodh. And the Gurmukh learns to fight nit ut jooj karije with these Panj inside of us every day with every breath. From the moment that the mind comes to play this game, the fight begins. And in the same way that when the Panj becomes strong within this game and take us into Rajogun, take us into Tamogun, where we experience pain and conflict, what do we try to do? We try to seek out the Sangat, we try to do Simran, we try to read the Gurbani, so that we can bring this mind back into connection. And in the same way, when the mind starts to connect more to the Simran, the opposing team, the Panj, also does the same. It tries to perform its duty and go even harder with that. In the same way that the mind will try and release itself from this game when the Panj increase when the mind starts to release itself. So Hanji Sangatji, along this path, and the Gurmukhs have shared this, and as a Sangat, we've spoken about this many times, that we find that when we're doing more Simran, when connecting more to that state of Sahaj, those Panj, whose leader is Gal, we haven't talked about Gal, but we will with today, will create some kind of turbulence. And we know that Gal and those Panj have permission to play within this Maya, within Dragon, but they don't have permission to go to our home. Sangatji, can you mute yourselves, please? Is there somebody who's not muted, Sangatji, because we can hear the conversation? Hanji. So this, what we know from Gurbani is that when this game was created, Gal was given permission to take care of Dragon, everything that was material. Khand, Patal, Deep, Sab Loa, Kale Vas Aap Prab Kiya. That Paramatma gave Kal the power to take care of the Khand Brahmand, all of the material realm. And we know that the material realm starts from our Sarir. Sarir, Sab Mool Hai Maya. So within this Sarir, we have the Jyot, we have the mind, we have our true self. But beyond that, starting from Sarir, this is where Maya starts. This is where material realm starts. And so when we do the Simran, Gal has control over the Sarir as well. And what can happen is that we're doing the Simran and Gal can change the Santolan of this body, those 5 elements that are created, this body is created from Panj Tat Te Tan Rachyo. So Gal can create turbulence within the body, can increase the Pavan, can increase the Agan, can change the balance of the Agan and the Pani so that there is turbulence. We can get some health issue. Gal also has the ability to affect how much wealth we have, possessions that may increase, decrease. Gal also, Panj, have the ability, as we'll learn today, to enter into family members, Sarir, who are Kamzor, and create conflict in that way. So sometimes Sangat will find that when we're doing the Simran, somehow, somewhere, somebody in the family will jump up and say, we don't want you to do Simran anymore. Why are you doing this Simran? And create kalesh around that. So Sangat, all of these Rakavata obstacles will appear across our spiritual journey. And this is why as we keep in the Sangat, Sachi Sangat, we stay attached to it, just like that bee is fiercely protective of its honey. Sat Sangat mil rahi hai mado, jaise madap makhira. That we learn that the only way to stay strong and connected to our spiritual purpose and our path is to stay within the Sachi Sangat and to stay within that Sangat where we are embedding that Gurmantar within our mind. Sat Sangat kaisi janiye, jithe eko naam vakhaniye. So, Hanji, the long answer to your question is yes, we've got to improve our game. And in fact, Gal helps us out because the more turbulence we experience, eventually we come back to that Sangat, which is, we know, the only real source of strength in this game. Hanji. So, Sangatji, at this point, we're going to, please feel free to use the chat alongside. We're going to go deeper into this understanding of the game, Sangatji. And so I'm going to get the whiteboard up. Why, Guru, why, Guru, why, Guru, why, Guru, why, Guru. We're going to just connect to Simran for a few moments so that we can get our mind ready to take in this wisdom, to absorb it, to make it a part of us. Why, Guru, 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 Guru, why, 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 Guru. So Sangati, what we read again within the Gurbani again and again is that we have an internal family, and there are different players, and these are just a few of them. There are many, many more. And we've started to understand who these members are of this internal family. And every single sarir that comes to play in this material realm has these members within them. And Gurbani and the practice of Simran is meant to give us an experience of peace within where these family members are working in harmony together. Sukhi base moro parivara. That what is that parivar that Guru Sahib is talking about, that Daswai Pacha is talking about? And that parivar is in fact our andarli parivar, those parts within us, those family members within us, that when the mind is not connected to truth, connected to Naam, there's a lot of conflict, internal conflict between those members. So, Sangatji, let us go through each of these members here. So we have Atma, mind, that is the player of this game, sent to play with its wealth that we talked about last time. Then we've got Atma, that is Paramatma within our Sarir, that we can connect with, which is the seat of wisdom, compassion, all of those gun that are Paramatma, those are within Atma as well. And within Gurbani, the relationship between Atma and Paramatma is described as that shooting star that has the actual star and then the aspect that is connecting, coming out from that star. That's how Gurbani describes Paramatma and the Atma. So we have those Panch Dor as well, which later at the end turn into those Jamdut, that come and take the mind away to Dharamraj. Then we have Chitragupt. And Chitragupt are those entities that are continually with the mind, taking a record of where every breath is spent. Chitragupt sab likhte likha. That they're writing that likha. And Chittar is writing and Gupt is, I think Chittar is the imagery. There's an image that's taken. And there's also a written account. And some of us who are interested in near-death experiences, like Amandeep Benji is, people describe that at the end of their life, they see a fast-forward imagery of everything they've done in their life. And this is what we know that from Gurbani, that the record at the end of our life is shown to us. Gurbani, it says that when we go to Dharamraj at the end, Dharamraj takes us to Paramatma. And that Swasadi Punji is opened. And the question is asked, Kya te khatya, kaha gavaya, chalo sitab diban bulaya. That when we are called to that court of the Lord of Paramatma, the question is asked, what did you gain? And what did you lose? What was that trade that was done? And what did you gain? And what did you lose? And we know then on the basis of that, the next Janam is decided for us. So Sangatji, let us understand this even deeper. And please feel free to ask any questions along the way. So we're going to focus on the mind and the Panch. And what Gurbani tells us is that when the Gurmukh mind, the mind that is connected, is in this Sarir and is extremely conscious of what the mind is connected to. Is the mind connected to Atma? Is the mind connected to Panch? And when the mind is in that jal of the Panch, then what the body, what the mind sees, what the mind hears, what the mind speaks is of a certain kind. So Gurbani says that Kal places a jal over all of our senses if we are not connected. Kal jal jehba arnani kanni kal sune bikhabani. And what the mind then hears and speaks is agan, kaude bachan. What it sees, it looks at others and it judges. It isn't stuck in comparison. It looks at other women or other men. What it hears, what it listens to, when that mind is under the grips of those Panch, it listens to Nindya Chugli all day long. And all day long, it is spewing out agan, Gaure Bachan. And that is the state of the mind when it is disconnected from Sach, from Nam. When those panj are in control and that mind is asleep. And it's the situation of the king asleep on the throne that Gurbani talks about. Kaya nagri eho man raja, supne paya pikari. That the mind that is disconnected, that is asleep, that has been put to sleep by those panj, and we can think of it, Gurbani, is as if the panj are giving the mind a nasha, intoxicants. There's a shabad which I'll share later about that. Krodh, katori, mohopali, pilava hankar. That the panj are belying to the mind this intoxicant, this greed, this homer, this anger. And the more the panj give, the more the mind desires it. And in this intoxicated state, the mind is no longer in charge of that body kingdom. It no longer has access to that Atma, the treasures that are contained within the body. It can no longer connect to Sahaj. It no longer has that ability to sit in its home and for the courage to be conducted by Paramatma themselves. And in that state, that mind is a mere beggar. Kaya nagri eho man raja, supne paya pikari. It's not a beggar because it was sent to be a king. But in its sleep, in that state of intoxication, it's not fit to rule that kingdom. So who is ruling that kingdom? It's those panchjor. Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Mohankar is in charge. And so what then happens is, Sangatji, is that the panch in every sarir, their job is to take the mind away from connection and to create Kalesh. So what happens, Sangatji? Sorry. That you take two minds, and we can think of this as two members of a family. And in both sarirs, both members of the family have come to play. So the morning comes, the eyes are opened, the mind doesn't know how to connect, is not conscious, and is instead asleep. And these two members of this family come to interact. And the panj inside are ready. They're ready to play. They're ready to win the game for the day. And so within one member, the panj will take the mind into Rajogun and will say, we need to do this today, or I want to do this today. And inside the other family member, the panj will take the mind into a different hut, Satogun or Tamogun. The other member now wants to, no, we don't want to do that garbage today. We don't want to think about investing our money today or doing something like that. We want to go to the Gurdwara today. We want to do something religious today. We want to give money to charity today. We want to do something religious, something good action. And then, if the mind is not able to connect to Naam, connect to truth, a vichara da takara happens. What happens is that those vichara are made different, and the panj do that. So this is a very important point. How many times have we find ourselves in a conflict of vichar with somebody else, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend? And we hold on so tightly to our vichar. We believe that we are saying the right thing, doing the right thing. But in holding on so tightly to those vichar, what happens is Kalesh. And so one mind is sent to Rajogun, Another mind is sent to Satogun. Then the mind is sent to Tamogun. So all of this is happening constantly throughout the day with every breath. Now, one mind says something. It gets to the middle of the day, and the mind hasn't connected, hasn't gone home, hasn't got its true khrak, its nourishment, hasn't got rejuvenated, hasn't got reconnected to Atma, the wisdom, the compassion, the sedge. And it comes to the middle of the day, and now the mind is feeling there's a lot of turbulence internally. There's no sedge, and a Koda Bachan is spoken from one of those family members. So within that moment, that panj has come up, that krodh has arisen within that family member. And the Koda Bachan has been spoken. Now the other family member, who's also not connected to Sej, has no connection to those qualities, those Rabbi Gun. And so immediately those panj will start giving that mind vichar. How dare he say this to me? Who does he think he is? Who does she think she is to speak like that to me? And what's come up? We believe that's our wisdom. We believe that's our truth speaking from within us. But in fact, the mind, because it hasn't connected to such, it hasn't got that connection. It's asleep. And who is it that's risen up to respond, to retaliate? Krodh. Krodh within one family member, Homer and Krodh within the other family member. And then what's happened is the panj have won that one. 1 point to the panj, 0 to the mind. And Gurbani tells us, Keh Kabir, panch ko chagda, chagdat janam gavaya. That the way that the panj win over this life, spend all of our breaths in those lower vibration states, is through is through this kalesh, through those panch chor. Keh Kabir, panch ko chagda, chagdat janam gavaya. And in this way, our breaths are squandered, are wasted. And so what Gurbani teaches us is that kalesh is always created by those panj, those thoughts that the panj are sending us continually, day in, day out. Panj chor, chit ve vikara, maya moka eh pasara. That this is the way through those thoughts, thought after thought after thought, thought after thought, creating those chemicals, emotions within the body, creating those reactions between us, squandering our life away in this kalesh. And Sangati, so we learn that now let's say one of these members is starting to awaken. One is Gurmukh. This is referring to the mind. We can all be in states of Manmukh and Gurmukh at different times. So let's say now the Gurmukh has learned how to play this game. So how do things play out differently? So the Gurmukh wakes up. Just before even opening the eyes, the Gurmukh connects to Naam. The mind sits in Dhyan, listens to the Shabad, or does the Gurmantar Jap, and does that Ishnan, awakens that mind. First thing, Panch Paherua Dar mein rehte, inka nahi patyara, chet sochet chit hoye raho, to le pargas ujara. That the mind, because it's now connected to its akal kala, its jot, it knows how to connect to jot, it knows how to connect to Shabad. The mind is now connected to the ultimate wisdom. And those panj that were waiting at the door to jump onto that mind, those panj now have to step aside and act as servants to that mind. And that mind is awake and aware. And when it sees the family member, the Manmukh mind that speaks that Koda Bachan, because that Gurmukh is in Sahaj, is connected to truth, such, because it is awake and aware, it has the wisdom at that moment that this person is not in connection to true self, is not in connection to Jot. That this Manmukh mind has been overtaken by those panj. And so the Gurmukh mind knows, uses Gyan and Dhyan The Gurmukh is connected to the Gyan that this mind that is talking to me, this person, this is not my Sati, this is not my friend, this is not my sibling, this is not my parent, this is not the true essence of them, this is not Jyot, this is Panj. And in that recognition, instantly the Gurmukh mind is connected to that state of Sehaj. Those strong feelings of Krodh, of Homme, do not come up. And if they do come up even for an instant, the mind that is awake and aware is connected to Simran, comes back to Sehaj again and again. And what then ensues, what happens then, is how long will the Manmukh mind continue to speak Gauri Bachan? It will last a few seconds. Inevitably, there will be no Kalesh because it takes two people to have Kalesh. And so the Gurmukh mind, awake and aware, is able to bacha itself, to save those precious breaths, to stay in that state of loving connection, anand, bliss, sehaj. And in doing so, gives the Manmukh mind the best opportunity, the possibility for the Manmukh mind to release itself as well. We know about the sandalwood effect that's described in Gurbani. That when that fragrance of the sandalwood that emanates from that Gurmukh, that spreads to those flowers, those vegetation around it. And those flowers, the vegetation around it cannot help but take on that fragrance, slowly but surely. But there is one plant that won't be able to take on that fragrance, that bamboo tree that Gurbani talks about, that's so stuck in its ego, its homme, so tall, straight, and narrow that it won't be moved by this fragrance, that it won't be influenced. And in that case, the Gurmukh, it doesn't matter what happens on the outside. Apna guna na gavave. Je koi nind kare, apna guna na gavave. So this is the state of the Gurmukh, that the Gurmukh doesn't lose its fragrance, doesn't lose its gun, even in the face of Krodh coming up in somebody, Kam coming up in somebody, Homme coming up within somebody. And then the Gurmukh mind, this is how the Gurmukh vichars, how this Gurmukh stays, how this Gurmukh plays within this material realm. So Sangati, at this point, we're going to pause and we're going to spend some time reflecting with the Sangat, taking some questions and hearing from yourselves any learnings, anything that's new for you that you've heard today, anything that still doesn't make sense. So I'm going to open up the chat at this point, Sangati. So, Hanji, this is a very common question that I've asked myself as well. That when we are triggered by a family member that brings out Krodh, should we stay away? How do we deal with this situation? So, one thing that's very important that we start to learn whilst we're doing this Simran, from that internal gyan that we get from clearing that mal, from doing the Simran, is that nobody can bring out anything from us. If something is coming up inside of us, that is because of our disconnection from Paramatma. And this is why this game is so subtle. The way the bunch play, it's so sukham that they can easily grasp hold of the mind without us even knowing, without us being aware. And one of the many vichar that come up within us that take us into the grip of the panj is, that person has caused this to happen inside of me. It's because of this person and what they said that I experienced this inside of me. And Sangati, that is not the truth. Dadda dosh na deo. Dosh karma apne. That so jo main kiya, so main paaye. Dosh na dije avarjana. That this is about my kiya, my karni. What is that karni? What is that thing that shouldn't have happened? Chinta ta ki kijiye, jo anhoni hoy. Another meaning translation for that is that the only person who should be worried, chinta ta ki kijiye, jo anhoni hoy, is that person within which the unhorny, the thing that shouldn't have happened, has happened. And what is that thing that shouldn't have happened? What is that karni that shouldn't have happened? Karmi apu apni ke nede ke dur. What was that karam that the mind chose to do, that action that took it away from connection? It was that karni, that connection to the panj. That the mind did not learn how to connect to hukam, eko naam hukam hai, did not connect with the Simran, did not go into that state of Sahaj. And that was the unhorny. That was the thing that shouldn't have happened. So the thought to watch out for Sangatji is that person caused this inside of me. So putting that to one side, when something occurs in this material realm, in our circumstance, somebody says something, does something, and in response, our panj jump up and react as well in krodh, in humna. In that moment, if we're asking what should we do, the answer is always to develop that connection with that state of awareness, that state of sahaj. In that moment, when we notice ourselves being triggered, when we notice those emotions coming up, those krodh coming up, we immediately turn our attention inward. So what the panj want us to do, and what we readily do, is our attention goes outward. It rushes outside into those 10 directions. It comes outside of the body and it focuses on what's wrong inside the other person. It writes kale lekh against the other person. It says in Gurbani, Je tu akal latif kale likh na lekh, apnare girvan mein sir neeva kar dekh. That this is a practice, Sangatji, that the Gurmukh apnas, that learns to practice with every breath as much as it can. That the practice is from turning that dhyan from outside to inside. And in that moment that the Gaura Bachan comes to us, if that mind has not practiced how to bring the dhyan inside and look at what's going on inside our own home, what will happen is that we will immediately start creating thoughts about the other person, judgments. That person did this to me. How could they do this? They're a bad person. They're a toxic person. They're narcissistic. All of these labels that the panj have caused us to throw out to others. And all of that energy, all of those swas that have been spent in Rajo Tamo. And instead, what the Gurmukh does is immediately in that moment, rather than evaluating, judging, analyzing, which is what the panj want the mind to do, the mind comes inside and connects to the akal inside, the jyot. The Simran starts, antargato out loud. Vah, Guru, Vah, Guru, Vah, Guru. The mind goes into the state of no vichar, connects to that Atma, connects to that seat of compassion and wisdom, and then knows exactly how to respond. It's not that the mind just quietly goes off and does nothing. That person never responds, but crucially, the mind learns how to respond from a place of wisdom. Yes, there will be times when that mind then, within connection to that wisdom, knows to step away from that situation and to spend less time with that person. Sometimes the mind in that moment will learn that I need to just continue staying in Sahaj and stay around this person. So it's about accessing that wisdom on the inside. There is no one answer for every situation. That is what's crucial here, that we're not just accumulating gyan, we're connecting to that gyan inside so that we can access it with every breath. Anadin Ram Ravi Jahe, that we connect to that gyan anadin, day and night. So Sanjay, I hope that's answered the question. When I'm in conflict, upset, and dejection with others, I recognize I'm in my pride and wanting my way. The problem is with me. Connect my mind to Vaheguru and my perspective will shift. This situation is not only affecting my ego, it's not easy, 100% body. That's exactly what the Gurbani is trying to teach us, that we shift our attention back. Apanare girvan mein sir neeva kar dekh. We look inside of ourselves What gap, what is this triggering inside of me that I need to solve, that I need to work on? So, Sangatji, let's continue on the chat. Thank you, Sangatji, for sharing. If you don't respond in a conflict as Gurmukh can remain instead, how do you ever solve a problem? Do you come back to it when we are calm? So 100%. So Sangatji, this is the difference here, that we have this idea that Sehaj means being passive. Sehaj doesn't mean being passive. The Gurmukhs, the Guru Sahiba that were fighting in the battlefield were still in a state of Sehaj. Sehaj doesn't just mean being passive or being calm. Sehaj doesn't translate as calm. Sehaj is a state of connection to divine. And in Sehaj, in connection to Naam, we can be quiet, but we can also defend ourselves. We can also do what needs to be done. We can be in a state of Ros and be in a state of Sehaj, right? So this is where those subtle differences, which are not subtle at all, they're very big, but these we come to know from the practical. We come to know from when we're doing the Simran, when we are connected to Paramatma, that sometimes we can be loud. We can speak loudly within that state as well. We can be firm within that state as well. But we have the wisdom to know how to respond. So absolutely, we solve problems through being in Sehaj. We can discuss things without our ego coming in, without the growth coming in. We can discuss things from a state of Sehaj. And in that state, we have more understanding, compassion for the other person. But we also have a great deal of assertiveness. Because again, it's those sponge that pull us into that state of being passive, isn't it? If we think about those situations where we find that in our own lives and other people, that we seem to find ourselves in difficult situations again and again throughout our lives until we change, until we develop. So sometimes we may find ourselves, I work within psychology, so with clients, and clients will come and say, I'm in this toxic relationship, where when I'm always getting shouted at, or there's always conflict, and why is it that I keep on finding these people, that I try my best to avoid them, but I keep coming into these same dynamics? And Sangatji, a person who passively accepts things is also under the grip of the Panj, because it's the homer, or those subtle aspects, the insecurities that also relates to homer. Homer is not just pride, So again, these subtle things, that it's that insecurity that will draw us back into a relationship that's not good for us. And again, I hope that speaks to this last comment as well. Will people take advantage of us? So it's the homer that's worried about people taking advantage, because the Gurmukh mind that's connected to Naam never feels that it's taken advantage of, even if on the outside it may seem like that, because that mind is in such a state of Sehaj. It's in connected to true wealth. It's in that status of king. How can somebody who is a king, if somebody, if we think about the analogy of king, you've got somebody in a court and they're the king, and you've got just kind of mere people who have lower status, when you're using this analogy, that are saying things to the king's not going to pay attention. The king's not going to bat an eyelid, because who are these people? What is this going to, how is this going to affect? Because I've got my status. I'm in this very high status. In the same way that when we're connected to that Naam, we don't feel that sense of somebody's taking advantage of us, because we are so connected to that divine intelligence, supreme entity, that nobody could make us feel lonely. And it's those Panj that make us feel lonely, that somebody is going to be taking advantage of us. So again, people, whether they do or not take advantage, that's on them. In terms of leaving a dangerous situation, absolutely. In that connection to the Atma, the mind will already know when it's time to leave. In Gurbani, there are many books that talk about, there's one that I can't remember, maybe somebody can share it, but when you are in a state of Saj, and then you're around somebody that is blackened with soot, for example, you can stay away from that person, because some of that soot will come onto onto the mind, right? So it's not about, staying away indefinitely or whatever, but, the mind, again, like Benji's saying here, it's not about acting or not acting. It's about acting from a place of sahaj and not ego. Exactly. So, we will know, we will have the wisdom when to come away, when to stay in that situation. So, Sangati, at this point, anybody got any questions? Amandeep Benji, I'm going to invite you to come in if you want to share anything. And any Sangat members who want to ask any questions at this point. Guru, Guru. Amandeep Benji,
Hanji.
Waheguru.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Hanji, yeah, so I kind of wrote a comment in there, which is just what I wanted to say. So, like Benji saying, in the field of work that we both do, we often get this, where people are saying, well, what if I'm being abused? What if this is happening? What's that's happening? And it's not about not ever reacting. It's not about not ever feeling. It's always about where is it coming from. So just like Guru Sahib did pick up the sword, there was a question that we were sent as well. You know, for example, Guru Amar Das Ji, when they were kicked by the Sahibzade, in their humility, in their sage, they said that must have hurt your feet. So their ego did not come up. They didn't say, oh, how dare you kick me. They were in that sage, and it made no difference to them whether this person had kicked them or not kicked them, because they knew it was coming from their bunch and they knew it was of no account. And then we have the example of Guru Har Gobind Sahib through to Guru Gobind Singh Ji, where they did pick up the sword. That sword was not picked up because of their bunch jod, because of their ego, because of their homme. That sword was picked up because they were so connected to Saj, they were so connected to Paramatma, that was the divine hukam that came through them. So when we're faced with that situation, with it, whether it's family, whether it's anybody around us, that's and it's not a question, it's not an analysis, but that's the point where we ask, where am I acting from now? And if you're not sure, I think somebody referred to it here, if something's happening in that moment and you feel you're in that state of anger or that state of fear, that's not a good time to react. And as we do more and more of this Simran and we learn to fight those sponge jaw, to control our own mind, that's not the place to act. So if you can remove yourself from that situation at that point, at least as we're starting, if we cannot bring ourselves back to Sage, bring yourself back. So I had a situation, been having conversations recently, and I thought, okay, I want to process this conversation. I want to think about this conversation. But the learning for me was it was not about thinking about this conversation or processing. It was about returning back to Sed, back to peace. So Maharaj can tell me what is truth here and what is false here, and then responding from that place. And sometimes it means you have to step away from people if you cannot deal with that situation. If you're initially on this, if it's bringing up a lot of your bunch jaw. But what you find is the more you practice your Simran, the more you're able to deal with what's going on inside of you, that you're able to then even be in those situations with those same people, but it's not triggering you. You're in Sej, and just like Benji was giving that beautiful analogy from Gurbani, you become like that sandalwood tree, and as you start to change, they start to change as well. But as has been alluded to within the session, the Bunj are very clever, and we have to be very careful where we're coming from, in terms of how we think and how we react. So just really repeating what Benji's saying, but I hope that helps.
Benji. And Benji, and the thing is that something that comes up a lot whilst we're doing this work and sharing, is that, sometimes we don't understand this thing around thoughts and not having thoughts. Vichar mare, tare tare, ulte jo na aave. This is a lovely discussion I was having with somebody who's actually here. Benji, you'll know who I'm referring to, around this kind of this understanding of no thought and being in that state. What does that actually mean, you know? And sometimes we think that, so it was slightly unrelated to Amandeep Benji, but it came up while she was talking, was that, you know, once, if we can start to grasp that notion of not being in vichar, even during the daytime, you know, this coming back to that state of sehaj, coming back to no thought, coming into that state of presence where we're not taking thoughts, we're going to be in a much better position to be awake and aware enough to pull out of these situations that happen, or to draw on that. So the problem is that sometimes when we're on this path doing this work, we start to think, oh, we should have good thoughts. So, you know, when we have Rajoguni thoughts, we're like, no, let's try and cut that out. We have Tamoguni thoughts, we pull ourselves back. But when we have Satoguni thoughts, or, you know, other thoughts, you know, we're like, oh, well, it's fine. You know, I need to have thoughts, right? Like, how can I live without thoughts? And the problem is that once you're in the realm of thought, even if you're having good thoughts, like, you know, I want to, you know, I want to be a good person. I want to, you know, all of this. The problem is the Panj have full reign within that Maya's realm, within that realm of thought. So it's when we stay outside of that realm, like in that state of connection, presence, the Simran, then, you know, we have a chance at not getting overtaken by those Panj. You know, that's the best possible place that we want to take, where the mind, we want to get the mind to sit at. Does everybody understand that concept, or is that quite difficult? Vichar mare, tare tare, ulte joon na aave. So during the daytime, so this is where, you know, we have the training, the preparation is when we close our eyes and sit and we do the Simran. Because we do the Simran, Vai, Guru, Vai, Guru, and the Panj are going to do their work. They're going to send thoughts. They're going to, you know, bring feelings within the Sarir. They're going to do anything to pull us away. And in that training, we teach the mind how to come back, you know, and it's not just a teaching. It's a, you know, if we think about kind of, think about it psychologically or neuropsychologically, you know, we are creating new neural pathways and networks every single time we bring the mind back to Simran. We are solidifying an alternative pathway you could think of within the brain, that path of live, that the mind then starts to automatically walk on that. We know that notion of whatever fires together, wires together. The more that we repeat something, it becomes embedded within our neurocircuitry. And if we want to think about it in that way. And then in the daytime, when the Panj are coming up, when we're experiencing a challenging situation, somebody saying something to us, the mind has already solidified that rasta of the saint, that rasta of live, and it will just more easily come back to that again and again and again. But that's the training is, you know, the Simran is the preparation, but the work is when we're in this dish and being able to learn and bring the mind back again and again. And in the same way, when anything happens on the outside, you know, whether it's health, whether it's wealth, whether it's conflict, we need to treat that in the same way we do with the Panj when we're in the Simran. The problem is when it's outside of us, we you know, we personalize it to somebody else. It's caused by somebody else, and that's just the Panj doing their work as well. But it's the same thing, that the battle was always meant to be inside of us. Kam, krodh, is nagar mein sabla, nit ut jooj karije. We never want to let in a thought that blames anybody else for how we're feeling. That's not about somebody, you know, not doing a wrong action, and that you know, it's not about them not taking responsibility. Nothing to do with them. We will know how to act. We will know what to do. They are responsible for their own lekha, their own actions. We have to focus, bring all of our dhyan back to inside. We've forgotten, you know, how to connect back to that path that takes us home. And the mind has instead become so fragmented in this dish. So, Sangatji, we're going to go through the questions. Benji, are you okay to answer some of these together? And then we're going to spend the last, with Guru Sahib's Kripa, half an hour doing a slightly longer Simran than we normally do. So, Sangatji, Benji, I'm going to ask you this question.
I think we've only got 20 minutes left, Benji.
Oh, Hanji?
What time? This session's till 9:30, right?
Oh, I forgot. Sorry, Sangatji, I thought we were here till 10. So, Benji, do we want to quickly answer these or shall we go into the Simran?
Whatever you think, Benj.
Okay, let's go through these. Okay, we're going to end up having a slightly shorter Simran time. Um, let me have a look. Okay. So Sangatji, what I'm going to do is take a screenshot of these questions, and they're very good questions and important, actually, Sangatji. So I'm going to make sure that we answer them. But I do feel that we need to do the Simran to end the session, and go a little deeper with that. So if we can devote the next 20 minutes that we have, Amrit Benji, would you be kind enough to guide us through Simran for the rest of the session?
Benj.
And then we will answer these questions uh, hopefully today on the WhatsApp group. We'll write some messages or send some voice notes on the WhatsApp group if that's okay. Sangatji, please forgive me. I thought we were going on till 10. So I'm over to you, Benji.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So, Sangat Ji, we have the Gyan, the knowledge, the wisdom that Benji's just given us about this yudh, about this internal battle. And the key tool, the key technique, the gift that Maharaji has given us is the Simran, because everything plays out through the mind. And if we learn how to connect this mind to Paramatma, then the game is won and it gets easier and easier and easier. So it's about our dhyan, our attention. Where are we putting our attention? So as we're chanting, the thoughts, the vichar will come up, the bunch will try to distract us, and we simply bring our mind back again and again to the sound of the Guru Mantar. Why the sound of the Guru Mantar? Because Vaheguru, Paramatma, is beyond form. So we don't want to focus on the body because we want to go beyond the body. We don't want to focus on our thoughts or an image in our mind because we want to go beyond that. And ultimately, there's two forms that are not physical that Paramatma shows themselves to us. One is through the Anhad Shabad, which is the sound, the internal sound. So as we focus on the sound of our voice now, we are practicing to pay that attention to the sound of our voice so that when that Anhad Shabad, when that voice of Paramatma becomes manifest within us, will have built that focus to tune in to listen to that. And then the other form is that Prakash, is that light, which is beyond the physical light, which is that merging of the mind with Paramatma. And that is also something that is beyond this body, beyond our thoughts, and beyond any physical roop. So we're going to chant Gaviya, sing Vaheguruji's praises. There's nothing more powerful than Vaheguru in this world. Vaheguru, Gaviya, Suniya. We're going to listen, pay attention to that sound, bring the mind back again and again. It does not matter the content of your thoughts. It does not matter how many times you fall or get distracted. All that matters is you bring the mind back to that state of listening. Gaviya, Suniya, Man rakhiye pao. And we keep that love, that loving desire to reconnect with our true source, with Vaheguruji, as we chant. So aao, sareਆਂ ਨੇ, ਇਕੱਠਿਆਂ ਨੇ, all together we're going to chant, keeping the mind focused, bringing it back again and again, and chanting with that love. Yes, this game is difficult. Yes, Kal, Maya, the Panch are strong. But Paramatma, Vaheguru, our true source, is stronger than any of those. And when we dedicate our mind to them, they take millions of steps towards us. So our closing our eyes, closing ourselves off to the external world, the external senses. We use our tongue to chant, we use our ears to listen. Ao, Karo Kirpa. Why, Guru, 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 Guru, Why, 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 Guru, Guru, Why, 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 Guru, Guru, Why, 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 Guru, Guru, why, 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 Guru, Guru, why, 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 Guru, chanting with the breaths, inhaling Vai, exhaling Guru, relaxing the body, keeping the mind awake and alert. chanting internally, antargat. Mind is chanting, mind is listening. And holy, holy, bringing your attention to the nabi. If you have lessened your thoughts, you can bring your attention there. If you're still having many thoughts, then continue to chant, either out loud or with the breath. And just notice, Sangatji, the difference in your mind. Even if thoughts are still happening, just notice peace in between, beneath. Maharaj Kende, Gara Sukha Vasya, Bahar Sukha Paya, Koho Nanak, Guru Mantar, Driraya. That when we embed the Guru Mantar within our mind, then we access that true home inside of us, that true home of peace. And as our mind connects to its true source and becomes peaceful through the Guru Mantar, through the name of Vaheguru, then we experience that peace externally as well. Bharasukabaya. And we're grateful to Maharaj for blessing us to walk on this path, that path back to truth, back to love, back to peace. And we all do a collective ardas, a benati, a prayer, to ask Maharaj to keep this mind steady on this true journey, to not get distracted by the Panchchor, by Gal, by Maya, and only come closer to that reunion with Prabhu, with our Pritam Pyare, our beloved Vaheguru. So Inya Bintiya Parvan Kanya, if we've made any mistakes, please forgive us. And Maharaj Kirpa Karan, we will see you for the next Q&A session on Thursday. The Binti is do the Ardas every day, that we are able to chant that name, to keep the mind focused on the true journey, to do that practice of the Simran, eyes open and closed, to make our Jivan safal, to fulfill our true purpose in this life. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.